It's your boy Luke here for our DFS fades and sleepers for this week's Arnold Palmer Invitational. Here in this video, we'll be covering my top 3 plays that I think are being a little bit overlooked in GPP contests by sleeper picks. And of course, the 3 guys I think are being a little bit overhyped by the masses, my fades that I'm going to be taking a stand against. The whole point here, of course, is to try and target some of the diamonds in the rough that can give you leverage on the field. And of course, try and avoid some of those chalk bombs that are going to go out and ruin your lineups. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop right on into it. All right, to kick off this video, we're going to start off with our fades. And at the top of the board, we have Viktor Hovland at $10,800, who I completely get the course fit. The off the tee play, one of the best in the entire world, especially for this field. And of course, that long iron game, also among the top 5 in pretty much any bucket that we look at. So you would expect him to be getting quite a bit of steam this week, like he is. That's why he's there at 17.4% projected ownership. But the issue is he's far from a complete player. We know the around the green play is an issue here, but of course the course history also not very ideal. His best finish here, a 40th place finish in 2019, has gone progressively worse over the years with a 42nd and a 49th place finish here last year. And if we take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, just to get an idea of how bad he's been around the green, you can see he's losing 0.8 of a stroke per round. In fact, that is one of the worst numbers in the entire world. So if we go ahead and sort this right here by around the green, take this in ascending order, you can see that he's going to find himself towards the top. He's number 4 in the field in that category, and the guys above him outside of a Henrik Stenson don't have all that much of a sample size. You're looking at less than 10 rounds for a Minwoo Lee. Sam Bennett only has 2 rounds on record. So in fact, if we're taking out some of those outliers, he's the second worst around the green player in the entire field. Of course, with extremely difficult conditions expected this week, as we get every single year here at this tournament. And over the last 2 to 3 years, it's only gone more difficult. It's not like he isn't a good course fit. He's just not a perfect course fit. I mean, look at these other guys up top. At the very worst, losing 0.11 shots gained per round around the green, but very similar ball striking numbers. I mean, the putter for Rory McIlroy is really what's carried him to this point. I would just rather take the guys that are more well-rounded. And that includes guys like a Scotty Scheffler, who in the past might not have been very good around the green, but he's more than plugged that hole. In fact, gaining across all 4 major statistical categories, or even a Hideki Matsuyama, who the only category he's losing in over his last 50 is putting, but over his last 24 measured rounds, he's become a positive putter, which is just ridiculous for Hideki. He's gaining 0.3 shots gained per round with the flat stick. So again, it's not really a knock against Viktor Hovland. I do think he's a good course fit. I understand why people want to play him, but when we consider the options around him, he's the worst player, right? He's the worst of the bunch. He's also in the middle of that price range. It's not like he's closer to $10,000. So as a result, will not be making my lineups this week. Perhaps when we get him an easier track, we're not dealing with having to get up and down as much, will be a little bit of a better play. Our next fade is going to be Paul Casey in this $8,000 range. They're at $8,300. Much like a Viktor Hovland, he's got the ball striking that we're looking for. I mean, historically, at the very least, Paul Casey has been a top 15, top 20 player with shots gained ball striking pretty much ever since he's gone on tour. So that's why he's getting a fair amount of steam there at 16.4% projected ownership. But the issue is first off, the recent form is pretty much non-existent. He only played at the Genesis, where he did post a top 15 finish. But outside that, we've hardly seen him on the PGA Tour. And while he has made stops over there in the Middle East, also in the European Tour for a few events, they haven't been all that amazing. He did have that win in the early part of 2021 over there in the Middle East, but outside that, Paul Casey really hasn't done all that much. In fact, this 15th place finish over here at the Genesis is pretty much one of the better runs of golf that he's had. If you take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, it'll become apparent why people want to play him, right? He's gaining 0.83 shots gained approach per round, which is one of the best numbers in the field. The off the tee play has been slightly above average, which for Paul Casey, it's actually a little bit of a letdown. But much like a Viktor Hovland, he's a loser around the green. And if you take a look at the putting, also a loser in that category. Historically, the more and more of a sample size that you give Paul Casey, the more and more negative that he gets in both of those categories. So much like a Hovland, I'd rather take him at an easier golf course. It's not like we haven't seen Paul Casey show up at major championships or these harder tracks in the past. but he hasn't really won one. I mean, right, his few wins on the PGA Tour have come at tracks like the Valspar Championship, which aren't easy tracks by any means, but a completely different level of difficulty from what we have here at Bay Hill. If we take a look at the course history, it's also something to note here. He has played here over the years. He got a 10th place finish last year. That's also driving a lot of his ownership, but hasn't played it before that since 2017, where he finished 41st. Before that, in the early 2010s, stuff like that. He had a few missed cuts mixed in with a few top 25. So it's a volatile course history. We haven't seen him play all that much. If he was coming in around 10% ownership, I'd be willing to take somebody like a Paul Casey, but at 16.4%, that's a good 6 to 7% higher than everyone else in this range that I arguably think has higher upside. I mean, Jason Kokrak, he'll be in my player poll come later on tonight. Absolutely love him this week. Max Homa, Sam Burns, you can see we're going to talk about him as a sleeper. All people I'd be more than willing to pivot off of. And of course, Keith Mitchell was our core pick. I thought he was going to be extremely chalky this week. He's coming in at the exact same projected ownership level. And if they're going to be the same ownership, Keith Mitchell and a Paul Casey, a Mitchell who not only has elite recent form, he's also coming in with some of the best shots gain metrics on the entire tour. Go ahead and take a look at that. I mean, gaining 7/10 of a stroke off the tee per round. He's gaining on approach, gaining around the green, and with the putter. Those are pivots that I'd much rather make. And at the beginning of the week, I didn't expect him to come in this highly owned, so that's why he's a fade here at this point. All right, and for the last fade, we have Christiaan Bezuidenhout, somebody I thought I was going to be playing at the beginning of the week, but he's coming in much more popular than I expected. In fact, easily the highest owned player in this top of the 7K range. And I get it, right? He's got the good course history. He finished 7th place last year, had the 18th place finish there in 2020. So he clearly has an eye for this place. But when we compare the guys around him, he's not head and shoulders better than these guys. I mean, a lot of them have been good recent form, like a Seamus Power. Corey Connors not necessarily in the best recent form, but in terms of pedigree, especially course fit pedigree, he's somebody who's head and shoulders better than a Bezuidenhout. If we take a look at the guys priced above him, of course, Jason Day ended up withdrawing, but guys like a McNeely would be more willing to get to. Gary Woodland looked pretty sharp last week, or even a Tommy Fleetwood, who I don't love playing in DFS. I don't think he's a winner. I think he's somebody who's definitely underwhelmed, and for that reason, he's not one of my favorite players. I want to see him come through before I start to really back him. I'd much rather play a Tommy Fleetwood than a Christiaan Bezuidenhout. I mean, even over there on the European Tour, Fleetwood's on another level than a Bezuidenhout. So if there's only a $200 price difference there, of course the recent form is much better for Bezuidenhout. That's why a lot of people are trying to go to him. But he's also coming in with twice the ownership as a Fleetwood. And again, if you guys have seen the channel here, you know that Fleetwood isn't somebody I usually tout. So if I'd rather make that type of pivot, you know that Bezuidenhout's probably much too highly owned. If we take a look at the course recent form for Bezuidenhout, it's another reason that people are trying to go to him. He had the 25th place at the Honda, but that was a weaker field. Right now we're in a very strong field. A very similar type of performance is probably closer to a 40th or 45th place finish in this field. A missed cut. The 14th at Pebble was pretty solid, but a 46 at the Farmers. So it's not like this guy who's lighting it up. It's not like he's posted a top 10 or anything like that, or a top 5 like we're looking for in DFS. And people are treating him like he's coming in on a scorching stretch of form. If you're looking for somebody coming in on a scorching stretch of form, look at Keith Mitchell, right? 3 top 12 finishes, 2 top 10s in a row. Now that's the type of form that you'd be wanting to try and ride. When it's a guy just making cuts, posting top 25s, that's really not all that impressive to me. So unless this is somebody that's coming in as an ideal course fit, somebody who just has an eye for this place, right? He finishes top 10 every single year. It's not going to be somebody that I'm forcing into lineups. Again, would much rather pivot to some of the guys above or even below him on the board. And now let's move into my sleeper picks for this week. And up top, we have 2 in a row. I'm kind of breaking my rule. I usually try and spread them across the board, but I couldn't help myself when it came to Hideki and Sungjae. First off, Sungjae was one of our core picks last week. Going right back to him, we'll talk about him here in a second, but very similar plays here. And you can see the modeling in terms of recent form loves both of them. It likes Sungjae a little bit more when it comes to the course fit, but from the eye test perspective, from comp courses, just what we've seen from Hideki at major championship type of conditions, he's also somebody that fits this course well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the recent form for both of these guys, because of course that's another reason why we like them. Hideki hasn't been super flashy ever since those 2 wins there in the fall, but a 39th at the Genesis, more than adequate. A top 10 at the Waste Management, also a 30th at the Farmers. So a lot of people are kind of giving Hideki shit, saying that he hasn't been playing all that well of late, but still making cuts, right? So not killing your lineups by any means. And if we take a look at the course history here, it's also been really solid. He's a cut maker here, an 18th, 56th, 33rd, 49th, 45th. The guy really just fits this golf course, and it makes sense. He's one of the best iron players in the world, one of the best off the tee players when he's playing his best. And the reason why a lot of people don't want to play Hideki is the driver last weekend looked horrible, right? Even though he finished 39th at the Genesis, on the weekend, his shots gained off the tee were in the severe negatives. In fact, he lost over 2.5 strokes off the tee on Saturday and Sunday. That's not something that we typically see from Hideki. I mean, he's pretty much a robot when it comes to his ball striking, so I do expect that to rebound. Another thing to notice with the course history here is a lot of people have been giving him crap saying, oh, he doesn't have the top 10 finish though. Like, where has that been? It's been because he's lost a ton of strokes on the greens here. In fact, his average shots gained putting at this event over the years has been close to 2 strokes in the negative. It's going to be hard for you to finish in the top 10 if you're doing that. Fortunately, though, like I pointed out a little bit before, if we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, Hideki is gaining with the putter. That's something that we've never seen from Hideki. This is a stretch of golf that is completely unprecedented from him. It's why he's gone out there and won twice over this stretch. It's why he's made pretty much every cut in every event that he's been in to this point. And if he does that this week with the ball striking that we know he has, I mean, take a look at the last 50 measured rounds. The guy's just been an absolute machine. He's gaining over a quarter of a stroke per round off the tee, nearly half a stroke per round on approach. Around the green's always been something that he's been good at. That's why we've seen him perform at these hard golf courses, these major championship type of venues. The putter, of course, the more and more of a sample size we give him, starts to look more and more like the Hideki that we know. But if he can ride that momentum with the flat stick, I think he has a legit chance to not only just top 5 this week, but to run away with this thing, win by 4 or 5 strokes. Next up, we have Sungjae Im. I know before I mentioned we're going right back to him. And honestly, he's going to come in much lower owned than he should be. I have him at 11.5% right now. A lot of people just stung, not willing to go back to him after what happened last week. And of course, I had 40% Sungjae. I was one of the people that got hit hugely by that, right? Ended up tanking quite a bit of my lineups. But at the same time, you can't react emotionally when you're playing DFS. In fact, when you have those edges where people react emotionally and refuse to play people, even though they're great plays on the given week, that's where we find the biggest edges when it comes to DFS. So let's go ahead and look at the recent form. Of course, he had the missed cut last time out. The 33rd at the Genesis really wasn't all that special, but he did have that 6th place finish at the Farmers that a lot of people aren't giving him credit for. And if you take a look at his course history, it is insane. A 21st place finish last year, which is one of his worst ever here because he finished 3rd in 2020 and also 3rd in 2019. If we take a look at the recent form metrics, even with the missed cut at the Honda, you can see he's still gaining across the board and significantly across the board, gaining nearly 7/10 of a stroke per round off the tee. He's gaining significantly on approach, also around the green. And the putter, though it hasn't been quite as good as we've seen in years past, he's still gaining in that category. And of course, if there's one time of the year where Sungjae Im tends to figure out these greens, it's down here in Florida, where he's an absolute Bermuda specialist, gaining over 1/3 of a stroke per round. If he continues to absolutely mash the ball off the tee, gets back to his usual thing with the putter down here in Florida, continues to gain strokes on approach and around the green like he's done so consistently over his career, I don't see how he doesn't finish in the top 10. I mean, the course history is there. The recent form outside the miscut at the Honda has been just fine, right? You got to give him at least a little bit of a break every now and then, right? You know, Viktor Hovland missed a cut at the Waste Management. Sam Burns has missed a bunch of missed cuts of late. That doesn't mean that they're bad players. Sometimes guys have an off week or even an off week or two in a row. So I'll be going right back to him in hopes that he turns things around. And much like a Hideki Matsuyama, this is somebody who could very well win this golf tournament. And they're going to come in at sub 15% ownership, the both of them, going to be no-brainer plays for me in DFS. And now finally, the last sleeper pick is Sam Burns. Yet again, another player we're going back to that's not in good recent form. But when we consider the course fit, you can see he's number 6 in the entire field in terms of course fit here at Bay Hill. The recent form is what's keeping everyone off him, right? Miscut, miscut, miscut. Even in the fall, outside of the win at the Sanderson Farms, it really didn't look all that good. If we take a look at the course history, though, it starts to get at least a little bit better. Outside of the miscut last year, he made the cut all 3 times prior to that. And this is when Sam Burns was nowhere near the same player that he is today. He's gone to a completely different level with his ball striking. He's now one of the best players in the entire world off the tee. The approach play was also a negative at that point of his career. He's really an off the tee specialist, also somebody that was really good with the putter. Now he has a much more complete game. So if we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, and again, this is over a horrible stretch of golf for Sam Burns. He's still gaining in every category but off the tee and putting. He's still gaining on approach. He's still gaining around the green, which for Sam Burns, that is something that's been a huge improvement for him. In the past, around the green hadn't always been his best stat. The off the tee numbers are going to rebound. I mean, we know that this guy, when he has that driver working, is perhaps the best driver in all of the world. He gets it out there 330, 340 yards when he's clicking, and he can go on a fairway streak where he hits 12 to even 13 fairways in a round, which is excellent for these bombers. The putter, of course, when he gets down here on these Bermuda grass surfaces, he's one of the best in the world, period. He gains 0.62 shots gained putting per round on Bermuda grass. So if he's going to come in at 8% ownership, I absolutely love him this week. I like him more than a Max Homa, also like him more than a Taylor Gooch, also more than guys like a Russell Henley that are all significantly higher owned than him. Actually, I shouldn't say significantly, right? It's within like 2.5% for all of them. But at the same time, I haven't projected much higher. You can see I haven't projected for 58.5 fantasy points, which is almost a good 4 to 5 more points than everyone else in this range. A lot of that comes down to his aggressiveness. He's also one of the higher birdie or better percentage players on all of the PGA Tour. Because he's such a bomber, has that really hot putter. He's no stranger to going out there and making 7 to 8 birdies in a round. And of course, when we're playing DFS over here on Draftkings, when we're playing a fantasy point game, that is always something to factor in. Another thing to note here is we take a little bit of a zoom out on Sam Burns. I mean, just remember how good this guy was last year. He's gaining off the tee, obviously. That's what we're used to seeing from a Sam Burns, gaining over a third of a stroke per round on approach, still gaining around the green. And that putter starts to get much closer to what we're used to seeing from Burns. So you got to take a little bit of a deeper dive on some of these guys that have bad recent form, because Sam Burns in the past, we've seen him go on these bad stretches and then completely snap out of it and almost win golf tournaments. So I'll be going to him in hopes that he can bring that rebound. That is all I've got for this week's fades and sleepers. Before you go on and get out of here, make sure you go ahead and let me know down in the comments, first off, who your biggest fade is this week, and of course, who your biggest sleeper pick is. For me, you already know my choices. My biggest sleeper pick going to be Hideki Matsuyama. Sungjae Im very close behind though. My biggest fade, unfortunately, Viktor Hovland. I just think that around the green play could cause him some issues here. Of course, the course history hasn't looked very good either, so that's who I'm going with. But before you get out of here, make sure you guys go and let me know who you've got. We're going to have our weekly DFS live stream tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so make sure to look forward to that as well. I will have a link in the description for that so you can set a reminder. That will be covering the weather, my entire player pool projections, any live questions that you guys have. We'll be covering cash plays, make a few lineups for you guys, essentially just get you guys completely prepared for the slate. So again, that's at 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight. Make sure to go ahead and stop by. Good luck with all of your lineups for this week, and let's get this cash.